in the future. So as we get started, I just want to remind everyone to please remain on mute throughout the whole presentation. If you have any questions, you can ask those via the chat function at the bottom right of the screen. And we're going to leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end of the presentation, and very much welcome your thoughts throughout the presentation. So for those of you who don't know us, for more than 30 years, Echoing Green has been on the front lines of solving the world's biggest problems, raising up the transformational leaders willing to speak truth to power and challenging the status quo. And we find emerging leaders with the best ideas for social innovation and set them on a path to lifelong impact. Our community of almost 1,000 social innovators includes past fellows like First Lady Michelle Obama, the founders of organizations like Teach for America and One Acre Fund, among others. Many of our fellows have gone on to win prestigious awards and recognition, including 13 who are SCOLE awardees. So at Echoing Green, we find, fund, connect, and support a new generation of social entrepreneurs each year. And then this brings us to today's session. As we welcome a new cohort of social entrepreneurs into our fellowship who are operating their enterprises in locations around the globe. We have in-depth knowledge of over 30 years of experience supporting these leaders and the needs of our fellows as they navigate turbulent times change. So with it, our support and outlook is shifting as well. So we're currently taking a step sideways and reconsidering and adjusting our programming to respond to the needs of our fellows as they're pivoting their own enterprises and confronting a global crisis. So today is about sharing that thinking with each of you. So as you all know, we are in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic, and it's introduced unprecedented challenges across the globe, especially for nonprofits and social enterprises striving to continue their work while also responding to this crisis. So many of our community members are moving into rapid response mode as they're working to expand and extend their programs and services to those who need it most right now. Our fellows are addressing the challenges brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic from all angles. So for instance, from an educational lens, Tony Weaver, who's the executive director of Weird Enough Productions, is making content free for teachers to guide a new army of parents homeschooling their children. There are translation services like Tarjimli, led by Atif Javed and Aziz Al-Ghanem, and Talking Points led by Hee-Jae Lim, who are working to bridge the information gap to ensure non-English speaking families get the critical information they need to stay healthy or seek help if needed. And also Vineet Singhal with Care Message, who's leading an organization that champions healthcare access for underserved populations, and healthcare is putting their messaging resources in the public domain for free of charge. These fellows, many of them, are making the tough choice to change up their programming or provide their intellectual property for free at this time. So now more than ever, it's clear that providing early stage support for social impact leaders is of critical importance. And likewise, ensuring that emerging leaders who will take on future crises are well prepared before the next one strikes. So a little bit about our fellow support. Our place, Echoing Green's place in the sector, is to build and support the pipeline of social entrepreneurs. Our investment in early stage social entrepreneurs is a means for us to bolster those who are on the front lines of addressing the world's most pressing issues. So we're able to adapt to changing landscapes and put resources towards where the world needs them most. And many times that means funneling resources into the hands of our fellows who are on those front lines. We have 3 pillars of support: leadership development, seed resources, and a philosophy of lifelong support. This is the bread and butter of Echoing Green. We are proud to be the best at talent spotting and have our mission be to fund, support, and provide communities to these outstanding leaders. We've supported global leaders at the earliest stages who've gone on to the front lines of global challenges. including Raj Panjabi of Last Mile Health, where that organization trained community health workers to stop the 2014 Ebola outbreak. And another example is Becca Heller with IRAP, and they mobilized lawyers around the 2017 Muslim travel ban. So these are just a few examples of how our fellows who are on the front lines are taking their existing programming, adapting it to meet the needs of the current time, and behind them, Echoing Green is providing various types of support, which I will get into right now. So right now, our leadership development process is discovering leaders who are best equipped to tackle the implications of COVID-19. And this is coming at us from every angle and from the earliest stage specifically. So right now we're innovating our programming to be nimble and responsive. So we, like I mentioned, our fellows need to be nimble and responsive. So that is exactly what we are doing as well, so that folks who are on the front lines can continue their programming as necessary, change their programming as needed. And so we are embracing virtual capabilities. We're approaching our programming with a flexible mindset and keeping in mind how rapidly changing policies around the world are affecting all this. Kate is going to dig into this in a minute, but we're going to be strengthening our existing support structures to ensure the needs of our fellows and be responsive in this during this pandemic. So we're launching two key priorities in the immediate future. The first is a rapid response to support fellows and future-proofing. In addition to being nimble and innovating our programming, we are also promoting our fellows' efforts. So we're reaching out to our fellows to inventory and catalog how they're tackling COVID-19 and its many implications. We know many of our fellows who focus specifically on public health are actively on the front lines, but fellows across all industry areas, all sectors are mobilizing to address this pandemic and economic turmoil. For instance, like Tony Weaver, as I mentioned before, and Hijay and Atif and Aziz. And lastly, we are encouraging community, building community and well-being. So one way that we're supporting our fellows is hosting community calls for alumni and fellows to share challenges and lessons learned around COVID-19. We're crowdsourcing and cross-sharing these resources virtually and encouraging fellows to reach out to our 3 chaplains who are available to provide the well-being support and self-care needed. So that's a little bit of an overview about what we're doing at an organizational level. Again, Kate Holzman, who's our Deputy Director of Alumni Ecosystem at Echoing Green, is going to jump in now. She's going to share some of the specific ways that Echoing Green is working on supporting our community through the crisis and looking to the future.
Great. Thanks, Leah. So as Leah said, we're really trying to consider how we can be of greatest service right now to the largest number of fellows. As you said, Echoing Green has been around for over 30 years, and our community numbers over 800 fellows, including alumni. So it's quite a large group with many diverse needs. And we really consider ourselves to be a fellow first organization. So in this moment, we've had to get kind of very clear about what this means and try to understand how we can put as many resources behind that as possible. This includes technical and well-being support, like Leah said, as well as we're working to build up financial support for fellows who need to pivot or scale up or scale back their work during this crisis. And then, of course, we're also trying to figure out, how we can manage future crises, how we can future-proof the organization for things that may strike in the future. So we're trying to be as nimble as we can. It's a very fast-moving situation, as everybody knows. And we're basically allocating as many organizational resources, all of our organizational resources, to these 2 priorities. For us, that means essentially reorganizing all of our existing and previously planned work to align with these goals of fellow support, rapid response, and future-proofing. I think in our conversations with others in the field, we've really heard that organizations that are able to not only survive through, but thrive through crises, of this magnitude are the ones that are able to sort of innovate and reorganize. And we're really trying to take that advice to heart in our work.
So Kate, as everyone on the call probably knows, Echoing Green, we provide startup capital to early stage entrepreneurs. And now that we're faced with a new reality, we are considering additional funds to support our fellows. So where we typically provide a 2-year grant of up to $90,000, we're now thinking about providing something above and beyond that. Can you tell us a little bit about what we're planning with our emergency response fund?
Yes, so we've just launched the Fund to Mobilize Against COVID-19. And essentially this is our initiative to raise and provide emergency funds to fellows as they adapt their work for maximum impact in the current climate that we're facing. It will also allow us to scale our resources to support those fellows through different training, operational support, capabilities, and wellness initiatives. Furthermore, we hope to accelerate the development of our virtual volunteer opportunities and convening models and expand the organization's own remote capabilities. So again, with the future-proofing theme. And so we're working to build out this fund. If there are folks on the call who are interested in supporting frontline social entrepreneurs, please plug in after this webinar and we can talk about how you can get involved in this work. As Leah said, there are fellows and alumni who are working directly on public health challenges. And there are also a large number of fellows whose work will work on some of the more indirect effects of this pandemic with marginalized communities that are now living at the intersection of the crisis with previous challenges and issues, equity, criminal justice issues, immigration, education. And so we're really excited to figure out how we can use this fund to support those fellows, and would be very excited to receive any additional, raised hands or interest in getting involved.
Yeah, that sounds great. And we're very excited to have financial support provided to our fellows, but we also want to make sure that we are supporting them in their mental health and well-being. So can you talk us through our chaplaincy model and how they're supporting fellows in this turbulent time?
Sure. So one of the things that makes Echoing Green somewhat unique is the chaplaincy program. It's a secular chaplaincy program open to all fellows and alumni. We have 3 on-staff chaplains. They are sort of very present at our events, and they're also available to fellows year-round. We're really working to increase the outreach from chaplains to fellows and the full sort of alumni community to add some additional hours and capacity to that program, and also to start to explore building out some chaplain-led support initiatives and opportunities. We really consider well-being to be a major pillar of our work, really taking care of the social entrepreneurs in our community so that they can continue to pursue their essential mission. We actually have a full session tomorrow at 11 a.m. with our Director of Ecosystem, Kate Hayes, our Global Program Manager, Rachel D. Lattimore, and one of our chaplains, Eric Dawson, who will tell you sort of all about this program and what chaplaincy and well-being means to Echoing Green. So if folks are interested, I would really encourage that they sign up for that. In addition to the chaplaincy program, we're also exploring a number of other programmatic support offerings for fellows. As I mentioned previously, we are organizing major staffing shifts to support fellows, trying to figure out how we can redirect as much existing staff time to emergency fellow support as possible. For us, that looks like exploring different ways to create space for fellows to create and share knowledge with each other and to support each other. Echoing Green has run a number of communities of practice programs, and so we're exploring how we can take these virtual and help fellows connect as we sort of all seek to overcome different issues in this time. So we hope to build out some communities of practice virtually for fellows to talk about anything from crisis fundraising to boosting morale, navigating the intersection of this pandemic with various marginalized identities and more. We're also hoping to find ways that we can offer operational support, helping fellows figure out how to, as we've all had to do, run remote workforces, finance and HR in times of crisis, as well as the well-being support that we mentioned before. And we're also working to explore ways that we can leverage existing resources and relationships that the organization has to connect fellows to different forms of support from some of our partners. And then finally, just working to remove obstacles wherever we can. As a funder, it's really imperative for us in this time to do whatever we can to ease some of the issues and obstacles facing fellows, or at least avoid creating more. So how can we be more flexible in terms of what we ask or typically require of grantees so that we can free up time for them to focus on their personal health, family health, organizational health during this crisis?
Yeah, I'm really excited that we're gonna start testing some of those things and exploring how we can implement some of them. So one of the other, the counterpoints to that, the complement is future-proofing Echoing Green. And so you talked a little bit about how we are going through a major upheaval in the past 2 weeks, simply in terms of how we operate as a staff and as a team and just our internal operations. And so this, in addition to rethinking our programming and updating it for a virtual world. Can you walk us through what Echoing Green has been up to in the past 2 weeks to adapt to a new work environment and how we're changing our business as usual for our programming for future proofing?
Sure. So like probably everybody on the call, the sort of most obvious shift is that we're all working remotely. Sitting here between my living room and my kitchen, and we've all had to figure out really quickly how to operate as a team without being co-located in our physical office in New York City. So that has been, sort of the first test. Updating Echoing Green's remote work and technology capabilities to allow us as a team to collaborate and then serve our community as effectively as possible working in this way. As you know, Echoing Green is a global organization with fellows all over the world. And historically, we've really relied quite a bit on in-person connections and convenings, on site visits by portfolio managers to fellows in the field, to all fellows conferences and summits, bringing everybody together in one place, in-person fundraising events, all of these things that of course now are canceled for at least the immediate term. And so for us, we are really working to pilot new ways of convening. So much of the value of Echoing Green to social entrepreneurs is the sort of energy and knowledge and community care that's bound up in this network. And so if we can't bring people together physically, what are the spaces that we can create for convening? How can we connect folks to each other as efficiently as possible to share ideas and resources and support? So that's something major that we'll be looking at in the near future, maybe piloting some remote convenings of different sizes. So that's high on our list. And then we also are lucky to enjoy support from a wide number and variety of different other organizations in the field, both, sort of in our own sphere of social entrepreneurship and also from the corporate sphere, our different funders and partners, and historically have been able to bring all of those people together through brain trusts or other different kinds of in-person events with fellows. We're going to have to figure out other ways to do that. So we're looking at piloting some virtual volunteer opportunities, employee engagement for some of our corporate partners, ways for skilled professionals to plug in and share their advice and knowledge directly with fellows without having to be in the same room. So watch this space as we work to figure out more of these kind of virtual volunteer and engagement opportunities for folks to support the community as well.
Thank you so much, Kate. You know, we are, as a team, as an organization, really excited to be trying these things out. And, you know, it's definitely, I know every other organization across the globe is grappling with all these questions and issues. And I think we are very much looking to learning from our peers as well as we go through this. So yeah, we're happy to be sharing a little sneak peek at what we are doing here as well. So I didn't have a chance at the beginning, but I just wanted to say thank you so much to our partners and our colleagues at school, and particularly Brittany Becker's on the line. So before we went any further, I just wanted to say thank you, Brittany. We're really excited to be involved in this presentation series. In addition, I just wanted to open the floor to Cheryl in case there was anything at this juncture that you wanted to say about your thoughts on how all of this, the pandemic, these upheavals, these changes are affecting Echoing Green and maybe even the field of social entrepreneurship at large.
Thank you, Leah and Kate, for hosting this session and for walking all of us through how we're thinking holistically about the need to support our community. And like so many of us on the phone, we're thinking about sort of the care and feeding of our networks in these unprecedented times. So the first thing I will say is I'm so deeply appreciative of both Leah and Kate's leadership, and much of our leadership development support work is predicated on social determinants of health, sort of a holistic approach to how you take care of the whole leader. And what Leah and Kate have articulated really not only gets into how do you walk alongside a leader during this journey, what are sort of the key inputs that she needs to equitably gain access to resources as she goes along her journey and builds her organization, but also really centering the well-being component that they've spoken so eloquently about. And increasingly, we know physiologically, we know psychologically, we know in terms of durability of being able to do the work, the connection between longevity and sustainability and tending to issues around burnout, trauma, and general well-being, so incredibly important. But increasingly, a lot of the work that Kate is doing is really sort of contextualizing the work of these leaders into systems of power or lack of power. So how do we think collectively about coming together to strengthen the work in our form of collective impact? So I'm really appreciative of that holistic approach to leadership development that you shared. But you both are right in terms of recognizing that pandemics are something that we will continue to spend the rest of our lives confronting, and it will fundamentally change the way that we do our work, how we interact with one another. And I was so excited about this session in particular, because I think we all are going to have to come together and learn and think in a very different way, and we've got to do it together. We've got to think across system, we've got to think across field, we've got to think about collectively putting our shoulder to the wheel to get through moments like these. And I said on a session yesterday that my greatest hope is that we just don't tend to the emergency of the moment, but we recognize that this moment is calling us to fundamentally think differently about how we organize ourselves and our work and the work of the world, because these sorts of calamitous issues, and it could be climate change, it could be another pandemic, it could be significant economic shocks that devastate so many communities, that there's got to be a fundamental rethinking about so many of these systems and structures that don't allow us to respond in a nimble way that continues to strengthen the social safety net that so many of our constituents rely upon.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. I think that puts a great, that frames our call to action so perfectly, that, you know, we really have three main ways that we want to engage and to come together collectively with all the folks on the phone, that we are inviting you to participate with us so that we can get through the next global shock to the system, as you're saying. And so, you know, to achieve the longevity and sustainability and to be able to fundamentally think differently, you know, we are putting out three calls to action, and that is that everyone should be supporting leaders early so that they can be prepared and equipped to take on whatever future crisis comes next. The second is that we invite you all to learn more about our COVID-19 fund. There's some information up on our website that we would you know, welcome your you coming to take a look and seeing what we plan to be doing with that fund and supporting our fellows. And then again, just really emphasizing this coming together and collective action to get through these moments. Please contact us if you want to get involved in any of our programmatic pieces. And Kate and I are available for any you know, questions or ideas. You know, for example, if you'd like to support fellows by providing legal, financial, or operational support, if you have ideas for how to engage your employees at your organization in support of our fellows, we would love to hear from you. And so thank you all so much. And at this point, I know we have a bunch of questions, so I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Cara Lee, to open the floor to our Q&A.
Great. So I've been scanning the questions coming in through the chat, and it looks like we have a couple. And if you have additional questions, feel free to pop them in. So we received one question from Chad, who asked, when so many organizations are forced to cease on-the-ground operations, how do you help them pivot their revenue model so they can adjust their approach to sustain in this period?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that is really where our kind of our bread and butter support comes in. We have a few different ways of working with fellows on that. The first is through their portfolio managers and the individual one-to-one support that we can provide to fellows. And our portfolio managers will, you know, provide any kind of workshopping or, you know, whatever kind of the thinking, accountability partnership, and whatever the fellow needs. And we will sit with them for however long it takes to dig in and make sure that our fellow will feel comfortable with that new, with the new thinking and the new thought process of needing to pivot. Another way is that we, like Kate was saying, we bring our fellows together for peer-to-peer support. And so that is a place where a fellow can also workshop ideas and come to talk with their colleagues who are going through the same thing. And you know, they lend support to each other through either a group call, but we also, you know, where we provide just a time for fellows to connect virtually. We've been doing that for the past 8 or 9 months. We've been opening up that space to fellows very intentionally recently, but now I think it's taking on a new meaning. And we make sure that the fellows have a chance to connect with each other in a group setting, but also we make individual connections and one-on-one connections for fellows to support each other. We provide connections to external partners so that, you know, if there is some very technical piece that that a fellow needs to work through, we have partners in the financial services space and lawyers and accountants and folks who are willing to give of their time to also work with those fellows.
Can I jump in as well, Leah?
Yeah.
I think another thing that Echoing Green is doing, and that hopefully, you know, other funders are doing as well, is just acknowledging the sort of radical shift that is being required of small, you know, organizations of any size at this moment, and just giving, you know, grantees and applicants a moment to reevaluate what this means for them and how it might affect their work. And how they can sort of rebuild their model for this world that we're living in right now. And so just that sort of, that willingness to have a conversation, that's, you know, something that we're doing with our fellowship applicants for this year, saying, we know that this radically changes everything for you. What are you thinking? And so having that conversation, I think, is really important for any organization that, that funds to do right now.
Great. So second question is from Abby, who asked for ideas about what has worked or has not worked about Echoing Green around virtual communities of practice and virtual gatherings, or if we have any suggestions of other groups that do this really well.
That's a great question.
I think one of the things that has worked really well is for those sort of communities to be fellow driven in their sort of plans and purpose and any like end product or goal that is set, for all of that to really flow directly from participant needs. I think it is one of the most important things that we've found.
Yeah, the peer-to-peer support, the getting fellows to just connect with each other is really the most important thing. And it's what we hear over and over again in terms of what is the most useful. So that is first and foremost, I think, our priority. Yeah. I don't know of any, at this point, I'm just in the process of learning about other groups who are doing this and doing virtual gatherings. We have done virtual communities of practice and things in the past, but not at this scale. So we are learning how to do that at scale.
I would say, you know, you might want to check the Kauffman Foundation, which is headquartered in the Midwest of the United States, has started to think a lot about building entrepreneurial ecosystems. So they are beginning to think about this ecosystem building work and network building work, and have some interesting resources on their website. So you might check the Kauffman Foundation, Kauffman, Kauffman Foundation. But it is nice in this time. I've certainly personally received a number of outreach emails from companies like, I don't know how you pronounce it, WHOA, these convening apps that allow you to convene your community, make sure there's good information flow. So I'm also looking for resources in this time, but I would just underscore Leah and Kate's spot on analysis, that sort of the peer-to-peer connection and the primacy of that, of centering the peer-to-peer learning and putting your constituents at the center of that convening strategy really is the hallmark for ensuring a successful and ongoing stickiness to the work that you do around convening. And it allows you to forge social capital, whether in person or virtually.
Great. Next question is from Zaya, who asked about setting up our COVID-19 fund. So can you please share with us your experience with setting up an emergency COVID-19 fund for Echoing Green Fellows? How do you collect the needs from the fellows, and on what criteria are you planning to distribute this grant?
Excellent question. I think we are still figuring some of this out. So in terms of the selection piece, luckily that is sort of one of the main skill sets of Echoing Green. In this moment, I know our selection team is starting to think about what our criteria might be, what a sort of very efficient process might look like that disperses funds most effectively and in the most high impact way, while also trying to keep it sort of at, as few obstacles as possible for those applying. We are still sort of in contact with our community to learn what the needs are, and we're still raising the fund. So all of these pieces are, in crisis mode, having to happen sort of simultaneously. And I think the process is complicated, and we're kind of making it as we go.
And we, and I'm sure this might ring true to a number of you who are part of communities and networks. So much of the work that we do is predicated on the vetting that we do of our fellows. So you've got sort of this closed loop community of folks that you've already worked with and you've got deep trusted relationships with. And in many ways, it's about sort of the urgency of response and figuring out how do you deploy resources to those who need it most quickly and in real time. So as Kate said, we are figuring that all out in real time. But there have been a lot of really good learnings that have come from similar economic downturns, and there's a lot of good writing from what happened to the social impact community after the 2008 downturn, and sort of the tried and true lessons of this is a moment, if you aren't already over communicating with your communities, your constituents, your donors, those who support you in many different ways, and not just communicating, but over communicating. And in many ways, the process for us of setting up this fund was not only the opportunity to reach out to our fellows to hear in real time what they needed, but then also to reach out to our funders who care so deeply about what they can do as global citizens to support the work of social impact leaders like you on this call. So in many ways, this is a process question about how do you step up as an organization and to begin to just make the road by walking. But please stay in touch with us, because again, as Kate and Leah said, we're figuring this out in real time. But it's a reminder to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and just the necessity to just start doing something in this moment.
Great, thank you, Cheryl. Next question is from Eva, who asked, if the fellows' business model can't really be adjusted, would you advise them to close the social enterprise, or would you offer them a funding lifeline to see what happens in 6 months?
Yeah, this is a great question, Eva, and kind of it gets to the heart of kind of our fellow support and what we grapple with in terms of how much do we sort of advise our fellows to take a particular action for their organization or not. Typically, we will be a partner, a thought partner for the fellows as they're going through any kind of decision point that they need to make. We would really never say to an organization like you must do this or you must do that. So it really is up to the discretion of the entrepreneur in terms of how they want to how they want to proceed. And so I think the point about a funding lifeline and to see what happens in 6 months, I think that's really what we're getting at with our COVID-19 fund. It's not something that we have done in the past. So typically we will give our fellows like a $80,000 or $90,000 grant over 2 years, and that is all the funding that they would get from Echoing Green. And we have, this fund is a new way of supporting our fellows, because we will start to give them an opportunity to seek this lifeline for this exact reason in a crisis situation where they need to. They need an extension, like we like to give our fellows that 2-year runway to support themselves, and in a time like this, they might need a little extension of that. And so I think that's what the fund is getting at to do, and what we're trying to offer.
I mean, the only thing that I would add is, again, sort of looking at some of the data that came out of the 2008 downturn. There were a series of tried and true strategies that nonprofits undertook. You've got to do contingency planning. You've got to implement comprehensive fiscal strategies. Time and time again, it was proven that collaboration with other organizations in moments like these were absolutely key in determining whether an organization actually survived the last recession. And there's some interesting research from a group called the Listening Post Project that looked at organizations that only pursued fundraising and belt-tightening strategies, that when you looked at their outcomes, they were likely to achieve only sort of on par or slightly below par outcomes, while those organizations that were really comprehensive in their attack on this moment of really, again, doing the contingency planning, really tough fiscal strategy processes and procedures, as well as collaboration. And the last piece about thinking very entrepreneurially about how you pivot, how do you offer something in the market that lets you continue doing the work. But I think time and time again, what is so important to you social innovators on the phone, you are social impact first leaders, and your current vehicle is only one methodology or a tool that you use to achieve your impact. And it's going to be tough for so many of us, and not all of us will survive. So I think we've got to be sort of really clear-minded about that. But what needs to survive is your path to impact. So being very clear-eyed about what you can do right now in terms of your organizational context, pivoting, restructuring, thinking about new products and offerings to go out into the marketplace with at this moment, thinking differently about how you talk about, evaluate, measure your work, recognizing that donors may even be more interested in measurement and evaluation in this moment, trying to figure out how to best deploy their limited or more limited dollars in this moment, all of those strategies. But at the end of the day, if your primary goal is to drive social impact and optimize social impact, there are many different ways for you to achieve that beyond your current organizational form. So sort of keeping that context in the back of your mind, it helps us all sort of put one foot in front of the other in the months and year to come, because it will be difficult. But again, we do have lessons learned from those who made it through the last downturn, and some who came out stronger, even better resource that allowed them continue to do their good work.
Great. And building off of that, Brittany just asked, beyond the Listening Post research, are there other research pieces you can refer people to that worked post-2008?
It's a great question, and we can follow up with this group. I would say that some of the readings that I have found particularly helpful. So Clara Miller, who was the longtime head of the Nonprofit Finance Fund and who recently left the Heron Foundation, I think is really smart and thoughtful around organizational structure and how organizations align their revenue and programmatic models. I think she's really quite good. I also think Robert Reich out of Stanford University, has written some interesting things on how nonprofits thrive and survive through these moments. I also think the Bridge Band Group, and I will disclose I'm a board member of the Bridge Band Group, has done some really good writing on how nonprofits get through moments like these, and even did some writing. This is all, excuse me, this next point is US centric. Actually took a look at some of the work that happened after an economic stimulus package like the Obama administration's 2009 TARP effort, how that impacted social impact organizations like ours. So worth taking a look at those organizations. And there are other authors like Salomon, Geller, and Spence who have also been quite thoughtful in writing about economic downturns like these. And we can follow up with you all as well. And please, as a group, we should all sort of share resources that we're finding that allow us to sort of pivot, restructure, and think creatively and entrepreneurial about this really unprecedented moment.
Great. And last question from Rebecca. As you think about future proofing, what, if anything, in the emerging situation might cause you to rethink your core model? What else could Equity Green be?
I love this question. And Kate, like, please feel free to jump in. But I think at the heart of it, we will always be supporting social entrepreneurs. So that is the core of what we will do, what we will continue to do. And I think, yes, like this pandemic is definitely forcing us to think about the how, and really how else can we be more responsive to fellows? Like, now that we are all working virtually, what does that mean in terms of supporting our fellows in an international setting? How can we beef up our well-being and resiliency support offerings? So there's all of those things we are now considering, and I think that is one of the things that is going to occupy our thoughts and our activities over the next few weeks and months, is just making sure that we have explored all the options of what else Equity Green can do in terms of how we support our entrepreneurs. But I have no doubt that we will continue to support, to choose our classes of fellows and elevate their work and promote them to the world and on various forums, and that will be the core of what we continue to do. And Kate and Cheryl, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that. But
I think just going off of what Leah said, some of the things that we're sort of really best at are the finding and selecting of really amazing early stage talent, and then sort of building a sticky, lifelong community. And so for us, whatever happens next, will probably continue to revolve around those sort of pillars. And so now we're being challenged to figure out how we continue to flex those muscles, and use those competencies to make the world a better place. And we're going to have to be really creative about it. I think in some ways, a lot of these things are not easy, but easier to do in person. And so for us, the challenge is, how do we, find early stage talent virtually? How do we convene people and bring them together to share virtually? And I think there's a lot of challenge in that, but there's also a lot of possibility. And I think we will probably discover some really exciting things as we are forced to stop relying on what has always worked in the past and build new process, and kind of flex in new directions.
And I will just add, it's been wonderful to watch, Kate and Leah and my colleagues on the programs team really be creative and opportunistic in the best sense of the word, not a pejorative sense of the word, and entrepreneurial in this moment. And I think it models sort of the behavior that we're all exhibiting in this moment. And, Kate has really been instrumental in building out our direct impact program, which brings together young business leaders to deeply understand and interrogate their role as civic leaders, and teaches them about governance, and exposes them to the incredible work that social entrepreneurs are doing. And then in a wonderful sort of virtuous circle at the end of that governance and civic training, Kate then works with these business leaders and places them on the board of an Echoing Green Fellows organization. So it's been a wonderful model that allows us to expand beyond just selecting a particular type of social impact talent, not just the social innovator, but also young business leaders who want to come together to better support the social innovation movement. Kate and Leah and the entire programs team has been hard at work recognizing that there is a lot of talent globally that is fallow. Again, our economy has shut down. And so there are a lot of folks, while still employed, who are under leveraged at the moment, right? And who are not working at 100% capacity. So they are working very hard on sort of taking sort of the kernel of what we do and then sort of tweaking it to engage this virtual workforce that is standing by, that is hungry to get engaged and to support the work of frontline social impact leaders like you all. So they are in the midst and in the throes of trying to set up these virtual brain trusts, these virtual engagements that I think is a really smart strategy for taking skills-based volunteering to a new level and introducing, categories of folks who don't interface as much as they should. So again, I think it's a wonderful model and an example of how they're being entrepreneurial in this new moment in which we all find ourselves. And we all can do that within our own particular organizations. And again, I just think it's what we're all going to have to do, and we're going to have to do it quickly. We're going to have to think about how to monetize it, all the while recognizing that, fundamentally we will probably work differently when we all get back to quote unquote some sort of normalcy.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Kate, do you want to wrap us up?
Sure. So just in conclusion, thank you so much, everybody, for attending this session and bringing your wonderful questions. So glad to have had this conversation with you. Please keep up to date with what we're doing at echoinggreen.org and at echoinggreen on social media. If you're interested specifically in learning more about the Fund to Mobilize Against COVID-19, you can find that at echoinggreen.com/COVID-19. Please also remember we have 2 upcoming pipeline sessions, the one that I mentioned tomorrow on well-being support in crisis. And then on Friday, there is another session with Echoing Green, the Skoll Foundation, and the Bridge Span Group on overcoming racial bias in funding. So with that, we wish you and your families and your organizations all of the safety and health in this time. And thank you so much. I think that concludes our time together.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.